PTG. That was delayed. Okay, so on Tuesday we talked about the NFS export helper change that I had proposed all the way back in early part of Hike, I think. And as we discussed, the main problem with it was I couldn't figure out how to upgrade people. So thanks to the insure share work that Jun did, I think we do have a way to do this. I prototyped something. The main thing that appears to be missing with the existing implementation of insure share is that access rules don't get reapplied. So here in the Etherpad, I have two patches. You should open up. I have made, so the second patch is my older one, and the first patch is the new one, and I've made the second patch dependent on the first patch. And you can see what I did here. I made a change in the manager workflow. I wish I could share my screen. So follow along yourself. Basically, in ensure driver resources in the manager, if you have a situation where the info hash does not match and it goes through the ensure share path, it will also, and if the driver in ensure share returns back this access rules field in the update share instances dictionary, then it will try to refresh the access rules. That was the idea. And Rodrigo pointed out that the way I'm doing this is wrong because if someone has an incremental...
It could be wrong.
Well, if somebody doesn't implement the recovery mode and they just try to add the rules, they're going to end up adding rules that already exist and it could cause errors. So we really want
drivers need to be...
No, we really need to force the driver to go into recovery mode. That's what we want. So we
want a flag?
No, well, in the driver interface, if you have an empty list of add rules and delete rules, you just have a list of all the rules.
Right. Then
that forces recovery mode. The problem is our access helper doesn't have a good way to force it to go into recovery mode when it calls a driver. So you proposed to change.
Did you read the comments?
Yeah. Did you read my reply?
No, just
well, why don't you share both of them with us?
Yeah. So Rodrigo had just pointed out that we could add a flag. My issue with that is that the way the access rule updates work is if an access rule update comes in while another one is proceeding, it gets, a database update happens, but then it just returns. And it relies on a loop to come back and pick up the additional update.
Correct.
The problem is the recovery mode flag does not get persisted in the database. So if you could send the command to do recovery mode, it would work as long as there isn't another access update in progress right now. If there is, we're just going to turn into a no-op, which is exactly what we don't want. So
no, and so I'm not sure you got all my comments, but it will really become a no-op if you don't do that state transition that you did. Your state transition forces the update access to be invoked, but in order to prevent the drivers from crashing if they don't, if they try to add rules one by one, and they try to apply rules that they already have, we needed the flag to invoke a recovery mode. That means we needed to not pass add rules or remove rules. We just need to pass access rules.
So open up access.py. Look at line.
Your comments.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm there right now. So are you saying what if syncing rules is not empty?
Yeah. Look at line 268.
268. Okay.
So if syncing rules is not empty, it'll just print out this message and exit. That's all this will do if syncing rules is not empty. And syncing rules basically means somebody else is currently in the process of updating the access rules for this share. Right?
Oh, right.
So if you're in that case, then this completely loses the recovery flag.
Yeah.
So we have to set something in the database that will tell somebody else who comes back later that they need to do the recovery. That's why I was saying I think we need a new state on the access rules, it says queued to recover instead of queued to add, so that when you get here and someone else has the lock, then when they come back, they do the recovery. That was my thinking.
We could make this sync rules condition be ignored if the flag is set.
But that creates a race condition, right? Because someone else is definitely
It
doing
could create
something.
a race condition, yeah.
So in the ensure share case, I don't think this is an actual issue because no one else should be doing anything when the driver's coming up. For the first time.
Actually, there will not be race conditions in the database because the database access is locked in this class. There may only be a race condition. Could be another access rule that the user may be adding later, or the opposite. So what are the consequences of both those situations?
Well, you would have two threads executing the update access in the driver at the same time.
Yeah, but
and they could be
if the user access rule, which is just a single one, is the second one, it will be just added. Just the single access rule will be added normally because it's passing a single access rule in add rules. But if it's the other way around, then the user adds that, and then we come and we run recover mode and remove everything and add it back again. So I think there is no problem because the database is protected. And when we're using recovery mode, we are always providing all rules,
right,
and including that one because the database is locked.
So if the recovery were to happen second by chance, you would be fine. If the recovery happened first by chance, you would have a problem.
Why?
Because you would recover everything and force it to an exact set of rules, and then you would proceed with adding and deleting rules. And,
which would be just an add.
And the second one would probably fail, right? No, because so like I said, in the update access case, this isn't really an issue because the driver's just starting up and no one should be modifying any rules. But we're creating a general facility here for that anyone can call anywhere. And if someone called this in a context where another update could be happening, then you could have a problem, or the recovery could end up getting in before the other addition, adds and denies. It's just not a clean way to do it.
Yeah, it's not.
The clean way to do this is to put something in the database so that on the retry, the recovery gets triggered. And the only way I can think of two general approaches. One is another state for access rules called queue to recover, and we could change the logic such that if any rule had that state, you would go into recovery mode. Or we could have some higher level flag on the whole share instance instead of the individual access rule. It's like a queue to recover on the share instance. But I don't know if that would achieve anything.
But we put it on the share instance, we keep the updates out when it's in there.
No, it would just be another thing that the thread would have to check when it was actually applying new access rules. You'd have to look at the share instance to see if it had the special flag, and if so, go into recovery mode or force recovery mode.
I think doing it in the database is more consistent with the way we're dealing with races in there and stuff right now. The thought is you update the database right away in the API, and then you inspect the database when you're going to.
Right, but it could be in the share instances table or the access rules table. I see. So the question is which one do you want to modify?
Yeah, so I'm very concerned about the state change because I don't know if you remember the spec, but the spec was very clear about the state machine. Since we have those conditional changes, it always expects to find a certain state and transition to another state. So we will need to revise the whole state machine if we add a new state.
So my specific proposal, only having thought about this for a few minutes, would be to add a new queue to recover state that was identical to queue to add in every way, except that if any rule is queued to recover, it'll force recovery mode.
Yeah, but what happens with all the conditional changes?
We have every place where we have code that relies on Q to add, we'd have to also say Q to exactly. We'd have to modify them all, but there's probably only 5 places in the code that do that. We could look.
Yeah.
So that's my quick proposal. A deeper proposal might be something more complicated, and I would want Gotham involved in something like that. So
there's no way we can accept this right now.
well, I mean, we can agree that.
I don't know that we have to agree. It can be in the code review that we would do, figure out.
Yeah, I want to get an agreement in principle that we need to do something at the database level here to force recoveries, and then use that mechanism in the ensure share path so that if ensure share logic gets triggered and the driver says, I need an update to my access rules, a forced recovery will happen. However, we decide to implement that forced recovery. And then if we can do that, then you can see in my follow-on LVM change, I implemented ensure share and I assert this flag that causes this logic to get triggered. And I actually tested this on Wednesday when I was sitting in the center meeting before we got all the bad weather. And I think it looked like it worked. So I started with an old version of the driver that didn't have the patch. Then I shut down the driver, updated the code, started up the driver, and boom, the access rule got updated. Or the new helper wrote the access rule to etc exports.d. The only thing it didn't take care of was the old rule was still in etc exports. I don't know if there's any way to clean up. So if we proceed this way, we will need a release note that says, if you're using LVM or generic driver and you have existing access rules, they will get duplicated and the old ones will need to be removed.
Will they conflict?
No. Well, yeah. So the old ones would, basically what would happen is if you had access previously and then you did a Manila deny access, it would succeed, but you would still have access because the old copy of the rules would still. Yeah, so you need a release note that says you need to go clean out all these old access rules.
So why can't you do it in ensure share? Because you're already parsing this file in ensure share, aren't you? Or you're just reapplying the rules. You're not parsing the file.
The problem is the LVM driver has these helper classes, and we don't. If we know what the current class is set to, but we don't know what was set in the past. This is the fundamental problem with changing
like
your
a fast
helpers.
forward upgrade.
You never know what it used to be. So we could add special cleanup logic, but if someone was using a different helper, the cleanup logic could do horribly wrong things.
So I don't fully agree with that because from at least since I remember from Liberty or Mitaka, that driver, the syntax that it's using in -ATC, /ATC/export is that the regular syntax for the NFS server. So that's what you would configure manually, even not using a Manila driver. So how could it be different?
If someone was using a different helper. This is why I was complaining about the fact that helpers are configurable. Right, you're right. If they were using the other helper, if they were using the default helper, we could add logic that would clean up anything that helper created. But because it's configurable, we have no guarantee that they were using that helper. They could have been using something else.
Oh, I see. Like sideloaded.
Yeah, and that's where we could get into trouble. That's why I want to make it not configurable, because there's too many problems associated with letting someone configure using a non-standard helper.
Okay, in that case, that we're not sure if we can successfully upgrade from something that we are not sure what the user had before to a new helper. Can't we just assume that? How about the migration approach? Because that should work with whatever the user had there.
So migrations only apply to the database, and they run while all the backends are down. There's no migration specific. So this was the whole.
I mean, share migration.
You're talking about
share migration.
Using share migration.
Yeah, and creating another backend and migrate from one to another.
I mean, someone always has the option to do that.
Yeah, actually, the approach you're experimenting with is an upgrade of the driver, the helper.
Right, this is an in-place upgrade.
Because you don't want to have the two at the same time.
Right. I mean, it would be if somebody had thousands of shares on an LVM drive, it would be ridiculous to make them migrate them all on an upgrade. I mean, yes, it's an option, but it's not a good option. It's much easier to have a release note that says, run this sed script on your Etsy exports file. It's going to blow away all the Manila-related rules, and then you're fine. Right? I could write a one-liner sed script that would remove all the rules from Etsy exports that had been added by Manila.
Okay, and then if the user has 1,000 shares and checks that file, and there are shares that are in Manila and shares that are not in Manila, how is the user going to figure it out? Which ones to remove?
By the prefix, right? All the Manila shares are going to be mounted under the Manila data directory, whatever that is. So if you know what your Manila data directory is, you only remove any exports that are under that directory. You can do it with the sed script. Directory name would be part of the sed script.
Okay. Both approaches have drawbacks.
Yeah, I mean, there is no good option here, and it all is a result of the fact that the helper was configurable to begin with. If the helper had never been configurable and it had been hard-coded, then we would know that they were using this whole thing, and we could have cleanup logic in our code that would just do this for you. But because it's configurable, you can't. So if you look at my second patch on the Etherpad, which is the older one, and it's updated now.
I have it open.
And give me a second, mine's slow. Thanks, Jared. Okay, and then you look at the lvm.py file. You can see I deprecated the LVM share helpers option. And I said non-default helpers are unsupported. So the idea here is, starting from Rocky, we're going to say, well, we're not going to remove it because we have deprecation. We have a deprecation process that says you got to give people warning. But we will officially deprecate it in Rocky and tell people if you do anything other than this, you're unsupported. And then at some point in the future, we could actually remove these options. And if you're running anything that's not these, you're just out of luck.
Yeah, are you aware that you're also removing the possibility to use the CIFS helper with IP access?
Oh yeah, and that was intentional, but I wanted to delete that code. That's horrible stuff. Again, that was just another bad decision that we made, in the early days of Manila when we were trying to figure out what the right way to do access was.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, CIFS has always been treated as a second-class citizen in Manila. We focus on NFS. We say, yeah, we have CIFS too. We don't test it. So when we really sat down and started thinking about what is the right way to do CIFS, we realized that user access is the only logical way to do CIFS.
Okay. All right.
So
that makes sense.
The open items here are still, what is the exact mechanism to force recovery mode? And we do need to add like a release note with this patch that says, if you're using LVM, well, the other problem is this only does LVM. We need to get generic covered as well, because generic is all the same bugs. We need a patch, or the release note will need to say you have to clean up all your Etsy exports when you make this migration. You can pull up one of these lounge chairs. We'll use this one. We're kind of short on chairs. So that's great. Well, but we should move the coats maybe just to a different chair. But yeah, chair is free for now. So let me write some notes here, and then we can proceed to the next topic when Tom comes back. I'm writing notes for this topic, and we're ready to move on to the next one.
All right, thank you. Okay, so thank you. Our next topic is looking again at the extra attributes which reminded me, actually had some comments on, so it's good timing. Welcome back. So, this is show the spec that we were talking about. Show the spec that we were talking about yesterday.
Yeah, on
The
Tuesday.
PTG, but no, we are not at the moment.
Tuesday.
Do we want to talk about the access rule aspect of it first, or the server characteristics, the red squash and so on?
So about the all scratch, I asked Emu and Gaussen about what is the all scratch really is in the driver.
Mm-hmm.
So you could share with us
No,
about your all scratch.
I actually checked it in our API. It seems like we do have sort of an attribute that's related to all squash. I don't know though how it's implemented in the system itself, but it seems like it is the main
It
all
will
squash.
have the all scratch in your
In the driver, we don't use it, but
not
it
driver,
isn't.
just
In the system, in the InfiniBox, it seems like we do have all squash.
So you could implement it in you just need to tweak your driver.
I believe we can, yes. I'll have to better check it with the devs, with the system guys, but it seems like we do have this thing.
So it looks like a common attribute, but I think but I'm not sure how other labs said maybe they don't have.
We are still not sure, but we think it's unlikely that we support.
Yeah, NetApp, I would say 95% chance cannot do this.
Currently or ever?
Oh, current.
Yeah.
If this became a thing, yeah, we could go back to the operating systems team and say this is a new feature we need to add. Just get prioritized.
But that would take.
So doesn't NetApp have a way to, it's the anonymous user ID.
Yeah,
so it's a similar
NetApp has
idea.
root squash.
Yeah.
Which is what I was thinking about when I said, yeah, we probably have this. I was thinking about our root squash. I'm pretty sure there is no all squash equivalent.
Right. And, okay.
There are, I look at the settings, there is no obvious settings, and I just need to play with what we have and see if I can achieve that behavior.
Right. And then you checked on Ganesha.
Yeah, I emailed the NFS Ganesha folks and they said, I checked the online documentation. They have a squash option where you can set, all squash and set the anonymous UID and anonymous GID you want to set it to. And if we have Ganesha has the root squash option, which is enabled by default. So right now we do a root squash.
Okay.
And I checked about the glance FS doc. There are all scratch.
What FS?
Gluster.
Gluster.
Gluster FS.
Yeah, but cluster is like,
The Gluster's just the. Oh, you're thinking about for the actual Gluster FS protocol.
As opposed to cluster with Ganesha.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, but Gluster is going to be different.
yeah, it's not being maintained. So.
It's not being maintained. It could be maintained in the future, maybe if
Maybe
somebody
I emailed
does it.
If the wind changes direction.
Yeah.
I've emailed the cluster folks like a couple of times
Right.
in community, and they say let's not maintain it, then they switch back to let's maintain it.
Goes back and forth. But, the Red Hat's not paying developers to work on it for Manila.
For 2-3 years. Yeah.
But so you're saying, but with Ganesha and SFFS, we can do it,
Yes. Yeah.
and we can do red squash as well. And in fact, there might be other potential characteristics that could get set with advanced NFS 3.4.1 stuff that are standard. Things, delegations, overlay, and so on. So I'm not saying we want to do them right now, but just a heads up, there may be other things, and then they are part of the NFS standard, so they're not.
There's opens up a can of worms because Manila has never said anything about NFS v3 versus v4 versus 4.1 versus 4.2 support. If we want to go down the path of Manila, even ask for a specific NFS version from Manila, that's a whole other feature.
You wouldn't probably
but I
need
didn't, I didn't so much mean to go there. It's just to say there are characteristics in that aren't in every version, so it's really
we're a long way off from being able to say like I want an NFS share that supports 4.1 with the following thing. Like a lot needs to change if that's what we want Manila's API to look like. Right now, we intentionally made it very broad and said you get to ask for an NFS share, and you're going to get an NFS share, and exactly what kind is not specified.
it's not.
And that was
specified.
intentionally vague to facilitate maximum compatibility with backend.
Right.
We didn't want to lock anyone out and say, well, you can't do it.
Well, and lots of clients are just going to start trying with 4.1 and back up to 4 and try 3 or something next. And, anyway. May not support them all.
Right, yeah. And so that was the motivation for making it unspecified. If there are use cases where users really do need NFS 4 or 4.1 and they really do need features, then this whole process for requesting shares is going to have to need a lot more arguments.
Yeah.
Say, so this is exactly what I want. Can you give it to me?
Yeah. So eventually that's something we would want an NFS front end for CEFFS because we have a proxy Ganesha which could introduce some performance penalties, and we're going to mitigate those or really help address those with stuff like delegations. Eventually, maybe we'll do PNFS on it, but so they're we're not trying to solve this right now. We're saying yes, there may be really use cases for this kind of thing, and they're not.
The question is, do you want those
black magic? They're
well,
pretty.
For something like PNFS, it can be opportunistically enabled on the back end.
Well,
the back end supports it, and if the client also supports it, you just get it.
Right. That's why I'm saying I don't know it necessarily shows up in the API.
Yeah.
Right. It may be a negotiation between client and server.
That has been the current design. Is the server will give the best thing it can, and the client will negotiate the best protocol it can.
But then
Manila will stay out of the way. That was the intention.
Okay. So maybe these other things are negotiated. I haven't sorted them all. Okay. The point is that we are thinking that it came from the root squash stuff, which is not negotiated. It has, it's a statement of intent.
Let me ask you a question. Can your backend do set all squash for any rule independent of what rule is added, like by default?
By default.
By default, like
All squash. If all squash is true, what is the default rule?
Yeah, like when you create a rule in your backend, do you always have to specify if it's true or false, or you can be set it to be always true or always false? Can you change the default?
I'm sure they can.
Yeah.
Oh, use the default. It doesn't matter. Like the driver can have a default in the driver if the
They
backend
can
doesn't
have their own
I'm
default
not sure why
value.
you're asking.
Because if they are using metadata to set this up, and if they really want, the use case is to have to be able to have all rules with all squash and not one or the other, maybe they could use the metadata approach to set this.
What matters is what the end user wants to achieve.
Like the user would want one rule to have all squash and not the other.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to make all the rules have all squash.
All the rule from one, all the rule from maybe one instance or two instances.
Not all rules.
Not all rules from all instances, just all rules from one instance.
Okay. All right. Just confirm that.
Yeah. Okay. So it's not just for backend that can do it. Others can as well.
Okay,
We always knew that at least some of them could.
And we know some of them can.
Yeah.
We think it's I think it's a useful feature. I think it's not just an odd thing.
But is it useful enough to do a whole new public share type, public extra spec on share types?
And I think probably because otherwise the user experience isn't great. We just have to go to errors instead.
Well, no, I see 3 potential ways forward. One is we just don't do this because we don't think it's important.
Right.
2, we do it properly with an extra spec.
Right.
The API gets more complicated.
Right.
Or 3, we implement some sort of an escape hatch that lets Huawei do this for their specific use case, but we don't enable it upstream in the general case.
Right. And
I want to talk more about the third one because that's a bigger topic.
Right. But for this particular characteristic, I'm inclined to say it should be the second of the alternatives because it's not just Huawei.
Right.
I mean, they raise something that other backends should probably, if they can do it, they should support it.
So the question I would raise there is like, how far do we want to go down this road? Like, if we do all squash today, how many more will we do tomorrow? And are you okay ending up in a world where there's 25 public driver extra specs on every share type?
Maybe 25 is a lot better than 250. It's a manageable number. It may not be 25 either. Maybe 12, 14.
Well, I was going to say today we already have 5. This would be number 6.
But so we
could easily see.
I could see another 10 coming in if they're real. We should ask about each of them. Are there things that multiple backends could implement and so on? But we've already opened the door.
I know.
I mean, we have replication, right? I mean, which is only a few backends can do, but it's a very valuable feature. You might want to buy one of the backends that can do replication if you think that's really useful.
Yeah.
And I can't argue that I've got a backend that cannot do it, and I cannot argue. I can't say. I mean, if we were doing it over again, I mean, obviously I can't roll back history, but if we were doing it over again right here, I would not be in the room arguing that because CFFS can't do replication like traditional arrays, that we shouldn't allow as an option for users. Because I think it's a very useful characteristic. There are use cases that need it. There are use cases that don't. Similarly for this, I think it's a real feature and really useful, not just some weird bell and whistle.
Well, I'm not sure I agree with that. But what I was going to say is I don't think whether a backend can do it or not is relevant. What matters is how much value the end user gets out of the feature being in vanilla or not in vanilla, right?
Right.
I think that's the question you have to weigh.
Here's what I want to say on this one. Okay, if everybody but NetApp implements it, and everybody but NetApp is forced to go do it as a special backend thing that's not in vanilla, that seems wrong. If we have to use option number 3, which is option to allow people to extend it kind of outside of really.
No. So I want to discuss option 3 in more detail, but I thought we were still arguing about option 2.
Okay.
And
how to do option 2.
Yeah. So option number 2 makes sense, but there's a cost to the community and to the end user
of having it be an
code and complexity and just ugliness of the documentation. You go look at the share type extra spec list and you see 20 different things. You're like, Jesus, what are all these different options? And every time you list the
option 2 have.
With we might say for certain features, yes, we could do it, but it's not valuable enough to our users to justify the cost.
I agree. And in this case,
that's the weighing act.
And in this case, I see everybody but NetApp. Some thinks it's a valuable feature.
You're talking about backend supported because most backends are supported on open source projects, and all squash went into NFS kernel server 10 years ago.
Yeah.
NetApp is one of the only vendors that happens to have a proprietary NFS server implementation. It's not based on open source, so we sort of diverged from the community.
You just didn't happen to implement it.
Our users never asked for this for whatever reason.
Right. And they might ask for
I'm
it, they
saying,
might implement it next week.
Forget about NetApp's users and Huawei's users.
Right.
Think of the Manila users, right?
Right.
How many of them need this all squash feature? What value does it add to them?
They don't know what's behind the cloud.
And I'm not trying to say that, I'm not trying to argue for that it's good or it's bad. I'm just saying we need to ask that question.
Sure,
based
sure.
on what the answer is, say, is it worth it?
Okay.
And I'm okay going either way on that. It's just, I would hate to just default to yes on everything.
Yep.
Because then we will end up with a lot of these extra specs. That's the only point I'm trying to make.
Yeah. Okay. So you want people to articulate what the value of all squash is?
To Manila end users, like, will Manila end users really benefit from this, and is it worth the cost? That's the only question I want to ask.
You want to check what is the real value about all squash from the user?
Yeah, so this is why yesterday on Tuesday, I was trying to get a sense of what is the use case, and you said that there's some specific customer of Huawei Cloud that has asked you for this.
Yes,
and I was
yeah,
pointing
who
out
asked me to.
what would be really good is if that guy could come to a Manila meeting and tell us specifically what his use case is, so that we as a community could understand how it would be used, and we could potentially propose other approaches to solve the specific user problem. Because it could be the user wants to do something and thinks this is the best way to do it, but we could think of a better way to do it that doesn't require any changes to the code, right?
But they have this request about the all squash. They have treated the user about this. Like we discussed it yesterday. I think you just said maybe we could create a micro share for each of the group instance.
Mm-hmm.
So my answer is, I checked with them. They said they don't want to create micro share for each of the group instances because they said maybe the file those files have some relationship itself, have some relationship, so they don't want to create multiple share for different instances like this. So
what are they trying to do?
They're trying to do is just find a simplest way to just let all users have the same room.
No, she's saying they want a bunch of users to be able to have the same share, but they want the access to that share to be done in a way that some users can see the same data, but other users can't see the same data, right? That's what you said on Wednesday, is that you might have all squash enabled to like UID 1000 for this set of users and UID 1001 for that set of users, so that files created by group 1 could not be seen by files created by could not see the files created by group 2 and vice versa. That's the way you explained it, and I was saying, well, why doesn't group 1 create a share for them and group 2 create a share for them? Why do they need to be on the same share?
And you said the feature was useful to avoid the fake UIDs the user may set when mounting. You said the feature was useful to avoid users setting fake UIDs when mounted. They could set whatever UIDs they want. Did you say that?
I don't think so. No.
Somebody said that is, I mean, all squash can, if you look at like the man page for exports, they say, for instance, that their use cases for all squash are things like NFS exported public FTP directories, news spool directories, stuff like that. Basically, you want everything in it not to belong to individual users and to be set to user UCP or whatever, so it will work when to an expected user ID that by convention will work on a lot of systems. Well, that's a real use case, though. I mean, I can imagine.
So I would not debate that all squash itself is not a valuable feature to have in the NFS.
Right. Now, whether this is what the use case her user has or not is the one, but it's. I think it's sufficient in my mind to argue that it's a real use case that ought to be. It's a thing that NFS servers generally support and is considered to be useful in the community.
You mean the general Linux kernel NFS server supports?
Yeah, kernel.
The user space NFS connection server supports.
Yeah,
Which are going to be the two most widely used implementations.
Yeah.
right.
Because there aren't that many other implementations that really even exist.
You know, and you know they support root squash, no root squash, all squash.
But all of them are just one squash option, right? You won't set like root squash and also, I mean, those are like.
You would set one or the other.
Yeah, one or the
They're
other.
mutually
So
exclusive.
you want one squash option which would
We have multiple
no
values
root squash.
We could figure that out, but we haven't gotten that deep yet.
Okay.
on the API, but probably. I mean,
Okay.
one could do it that way.
So you said that if a user is UID 1000 and the other would be 2000, but the user can change his UID 1 month in the share and see the contents of UID 1000.
But that's a client side thing.
Yes.
I mean, when you have all squash turned on, it doesn't matter what UID the client sends; they get squashed to the one the server says they are.
Yes.
So if there are files, if the server is squashing you to ID 1000 and there's a file that's owned by UID 1001 and is permission 600, you will not be able to read or write that file.
Yes.
Period.
Even though you can use that UID when mounted.
Right.
Okay.
You can set whatever you want in the client.
You say I'm
UI.
UID 1000 or 1001 or whatever, and the server says, I don't care, I'm going to make you UID 42 or whatever.
Yeah.
That's what squashing is. You say you're Rodrigo, I don't care if you're Rodrigo. You know, I'm going to treat you like that. Everybody's bound on the server.
Yeah, so squashing is
Well,
only
everyone
for
thinks-
UIDs that are not registered on the server, like with LDAP or Kerberos, right?
Pardon?
This UID this squashing of UIDs is only applied to users that are not registered on the server.
All squash means everyone, people that are known and unknown. All
You're mixing it up with the anonymous one.
Yeah.
Thing is, which is the ones we don't know, you know, what we treat them as.
Oh, I thought always it was squashing to anonymous one.
It's complicated, and what's more complicated is each backend does it a little bit differently.
How is different?
They might, but they shouldn't. I mean, there's a standard
This is
there.
standard.
I'm not
This
arguing
is-
that people don't
This is
implement it.
de facto implementation, but this is nowhere is any of this written in the NFS standard. The NFS standard talks about protocol,
Okay.
not this is an implementation detail of the server
Okay.
that happens to be shared by everyone who uses the open source server implementation.
I see.
But it's not standard. It's just whatever the Linux guys wrote for their implementation, and that's how it's been allowed to diverge, is because it's an implementation detail.
Yeah, so you're talking about all squashing for specific access rules, which means specific IP range or subnets or
Yeah.
users.
That's what Jun is asking.
Yes, so we actually have all squash for specific export paths.
Yeah. Well, and
So
again,
that's the problem here
that's
because
how the NFS kernel server guys decided to implement it when they added this to Linux. Is that it's a flag you can put on each rule, and then it gets applied to that rule only.
we'll actually change our driver implementation because actually at the moment we only have one export path per share that we export to Manila.
What implementation of an NFS server do you guys use? Is it proprietary or based on one of the open source
I think
ones?
it's based on CentOS or something like that.
Okay, yeah, so you're getting whatever CentOS has.
Yeah, maybe they modified it a bit, but I really don't, I'm not sure.
I would bet you that 80% of the NFS implementations out there just use whatever Linux has. Because
Just
that's the
use
easiest thing to do.
Well,
Users
it's also
just
easiest in
using
terms of user
in
expectations. You know.
Well, like I said,
Users
it's de
just
facto
using
standard
what
that's been created.
Use.
But I guess Romana's point too is that if you took it to an extra spec, we could probably use a squash extra spec. You know, you're not talking about adding 3 or 4 and
Well,
all squash and versus
you would need what squashing mode you have, and then maybe another one for what you want to need to squash to.
Exactly. Exactly. That's
So we could design this and make it a standard thing, but you would need to be a capability that says sometimes you won't be able to get this stuff.
That's right.
Yes, and you can have a root squash and the other one as well at the same time.
No, you can only have one type of squash going on.
You're saying would we design that at the same time?
Yeah, it's like
Yeah, I think we would design it at the same time, right?
So-
we wrote squash as well as.
So if we all want to do option 2, then we need to have a spec that describes how we do it.
mhm.
I wanted to suggest that option 3 might be cheaper, and it might be something we have to do anyways, because this isn't the only thing that always is suggested as a feature.
Well, we might have to do option 3 anyway.
Right.
So it might not be, whether or not it's appropriate for this one is another thing.
Yeah. But that's when we should talk about it now.
Yeah, I think that's okay.
So how
So-
about the agreement about the or squash?
It depends on the next discussion. Which direction we want.
I think
I'm okay with either way.
I think we're agreeing that it's valuable. The question is whether we want to say, yes, it should be a new extra spec. And we do the capability stuff around it, or whether we do option number 3 for it, which remains something that to be just, we need to understand what option 3 is still. You have a.
Yeah, so going back to the old days of Cinder, there was a recognition that deployers tend to do non-standard things. Deployers end up de facto forking these upstream projects to add their special sauce. Like we saw this with Rackspace. I think we saw this with HP. Apparently Huawei has effectively forked Cinder Manila, some special downstream stuff. I mean, and
All of the data.
Is that correct? Just so we understand right now that you basically run your own version of OpenStack that's close, has some differences then.
Yeah,
But
has
not
some
extreme.
differences.
yeah, I mean, and it's natural for a deployer to want to do that, right? We shouldn't be surprised that deployers feel the need to do this. And so in the Cinder world, there was a concept that never actually got exercised of API extensions. Unfortunately, the API extension mechanism ended up getting used to implement a lot of Cinder's core features, which was just a mistake. And so we went through a whole exercise several releases back where we moved all the extension code out of the extensions. So the original intention of extensions was that a deployer could add additional code to their OpenStack, or Cinder in this case, implementation that was not upstream, and Cinder would just load this extra code and basically have a different set of APIs or an additional set of APIs on top of what the upstream code contained. And it would be a way for somebody to basically extend the functionality of Cinder or Manila without having to push their changes upstream. And they could prototype something, they could implement it, they could put it out for people to use, and then maybe if people liked it, it could be migrated into the upstream code base, right? It's just a way to do prototypes, a way to do experiments. I mean, every software project needs this capability to try stuff out before you merge it upstream. It's just a basic thing you need for software development. So I would love to have something like that for Manila, because I think it would address a lot of these kinds of needs. If Huawei had a customer that wanted to do something, it was going to be slow for us to do it upstream or controversial for whatever reason, they would just have a path to just go do it. And then if it turned out to be something that they wanted to push upstream, then they could basically show us, well, here's the implementation we went with. We want to merge it.
Yeah.
We want to integrate it in or not. It would, I think, smooth over this whole process of proposing features and arguing about how they should work, because you could just implement it. This is how it works. Do you like it or not?
So the question would be how?
Right. So, I don't know if any of you have actually looked at what a Cinder API extensions, Manila API extensions look like. It's, I think we're using Flask for several reasons. I know so little about our API service.
If you're
Actually
using
Flask, are we? Does anyone know?
What is
I don't
Flask?
think we do.
What are we using in the API service to manage our REST APIs?
SGI.
Yeah, so
Whiskey.
we're using Whiskey,
All right.
so
So-
which is it's not a particular implementation that I'm aware of that is based on. It might have come.
Well, it
from
might be a
somewhere.
homegrown whiskey.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what.
In any case, whatever it is,
It's not Jameson's or Powell's, it's-
whatever it is has the capability to load extra stuff. And
Yes.
that was the point of extension. So conceivably, we could use that mechanism. If Huawei wanted to just add another API to Manila, they could just write some code that would hook into the Manila extension mechanism. Then in the Huawei cloud, you would get all the Manila APIs plus some.
But in this
right?
requirement, we just
No,
want.
I know that it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, but we don't have only APIs. We have the main share manager. We have drivers.
Yeah.
We have rescheduler. If the change requires
I know.
changes,
This is exactly where the problem ended up in Cinder is if you wanted to implement an extension, very often to actually do the extension right, you had to make changes to the database, changes to the SQL alchemy models, and you ended up basically mucking with all the code anyways. So the extension mechanism doesn't work well for most types of features that you would want to do because you end up making a fork anyways when you do this.
Yes.
There are some very limited APIs which don't require database changes, which you could do this way, and it would just work. But you're pretty limited in what you can do. So what I understand is Huawei already abuses the metadata fields of like shares and also snapshots, or
No snapshots. We don't have metadata in snapshots
so
now.
you were saying you
I just say metadata for snapshot is just in Cinder,
okay.
and the metadata for volume in Cinder.
Okay.
And we implement metadata for volume in Cinder. And we
And
really
not snapshot.
implement.
I think they can access
Just
the
insert
share
that in
snapshot. Sorry, the share metadata from the snapshot.
Sure, you can. But you might want to have metadata per snapshot.
Oh.
Apparently we can't do that. But you're saying you don't actually use that mechanism for anything. But you do use the volume metadata and the share metadata.
Yeah, volume metadata, share metadata, volume snapshot metadata, volume backup metadata.
Oh, volume snapshot metadata you
Yeah.
do use.
Yeah, volume
Okay.
snapshot metadata.
Okay.
And volume backup metadata.
Okay. So upstream, we explicitly forbid vendors to do things like this, right? We say you cannot write your driver to read the metadata fields of a share and do something differently because that's an incorrect use of the API. But downstream in a deployment, if they've already forked Manila or Cinder, then they can do stuff like that. And it gives them the power to basically extend Cinder Manila very cheaply without requiring changes upstream. Because this metadata field already exists, and they can say, well, yeah, upstream, these metadata fields aren't supposed to have any meaning. But in Huawei's cloud, they have the following special meanings. So what told me, and I didn't really understand it until later, but on Tuesday he was saying what Huawei would like is just metadata fields on the export location, right? If we were to, I'm sorry, not
No,
the
the access rules, the export locations already have metadata.
Yeah, you're right. But that metadata comes from the driver, not from the user.
Yeah.
It's a different kind of metadata. And I hate the term metadata, whatever.
But could we just try about metadata?
Well, yeah, so what I was going to say is one option we have as a community that's much cheaper than option number 2 is say, yeah, we're just going to add metadata fields to access rules.
And you use it however you want.
And upstream will, again, explicitly forbid them having any meaning. But we'll know that deployers may actually do something with them, and it frees them up to do the kinds of experiments they want to do. That would take care of, that would allow Huawei to do the all squash thing they want to do, and a bunch of other things they may want to do that we don't know about yet. And it would be much less effort to do upstream. So I think that's a reasonable proposal. I mean, it's kind of gross because, again, abusing metadata is something you're not supposed to do. But I personally accept that deployers have to do these kinds of things to run their business. We saw it with Rackspace, we saw it with HP and other clouds.
So with that approach, I think you were back to pretty much the open string field, right?
Yeah.
Because you can do whatever you want over there. And
but only a downstream deployer would do this. Upstream, we would have to maintain the stance that we always have, which is drivers should not do anything with these fields.
So we wouldn't accept any driver code that handles metadata.
Right.
But we already
I'm
you say
getting the
any,
feeling that they want to push this
for,
upstream
no, no.
exchange.
If you say any driver in implements, you can say some of the driver already use the share metadata in their driver
No.
in upstream code. Do you say
Which
this?
one?
In it named mapfs or
MapRFS does this.
mapfs.
So
It really use share metadata in their
they're
driver.
not supposed to. Someone should have caught that in their view. So the problem is that if we open this up to vendors to start adding stuff, it'll become chaos because vendors will just take every feature they have and implement it through metadata fields, and then you'll have a situation where, depending on which cloud you're running your application on, and depending on what backend that cloud has chosen, certain metadata fields may or may not work.
I mean, let's take another step back because by doing this, it looks like we're opening the door and motivating vendors to do their own versions of their drivers on Manila and downstream stuff, modifications that we don't want upstream, because we're now providing them the tools to do that instead and saying that you cannot submit this kind of stuff upstream. Then just say, okay, we will not, but we will do it downstream.
So the reason it bothers me less downstream is because Huawei is running a business, and their cloud, they can document in their user docs, in addition to the regular OpenStack APIs, we support the following metadata fields, and they can actually support them.
In that case, don't you prefer that they fork Manila, have their own Huawei Manila? And
No, we don't want anyone to fork the upstream project, but it's inevitable that it will happen. Well, what we want is for anyone who does feel the need to fork to follow as closely as possible, and to fork and to have minimum deviation from what we have, right? Ideally, zero deviation, no fork. But given that there's always going to be something, we want it to be minimal. So what I was getting at is, if we open this up to vendors, like I'm sure that NetApp would implement 100 of these things immediately. Right? And then the problem would be, well, if you happen to be running on a cloud that had a NetApp backend and you requested a Manila share, you might get these special features. But if you're on another cloud that doesn't have a NetApp backend and you put the same metadata field in, nothing's going to happen. The problem is you'll never know. Right?
that would be a bad user experience.
And our argument in the community is you're not supposed to, right? It's not supposed to be possible to determine through the Manila API whether the backend is a NetApp backend or an EMC backend or an Infinidat backend. You shouldn't know. Manila should not tell you. Now, if the deployer says, well, we have made the guarantee that all the backends that we have, whatever they are, also support this other stuff, then that's on the deployer to make that guarantee and provide support for those features. But Manila shouldn't be facilitating that, right?
Yeah,
and we don't want to be in a position where where vendors are incentivized to just push a bunch of incompatible features into their drivers.
Yeah.
So that's why we've always said vendors may not abuse the metadata fields because it creates a situation where different deployers now have this mess. But if a deployer says we do want to support extra stuff, and it's the deployer's decision, it's a totally different situation because they're the ones who actually have to support the cloud.
And maybe the deployer administrator should know about how to use the metadata in their environment.
Yes. I mean, I get that
Then
Huawei's
you
made the
could-
decision to add some code to use metadata fields for their cloud, and they support. And I presume your documentation.
So if you
explains
enable it for deployers, how do you keep it from being used by non-deployer vendors?
Well, we wouldn't take these changes upstream. Ideally,
Right.
right? We would say you can do this downstream, but you're not putting it up. So if I run the Huawei driver on my Huawei hardware, I should not get these special behaviors, right?
But our requirement is just merged in the upstream.
So I have a problem with that because
Yeah.
that doesn't only affect Huawei's cloud, that affects anyone else who buys Huawei's hardware, right? And uses the Manila driver. And then you do have a situation where a client of Manila gets a different behavior depending on what backend they're running.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing that Manila is.
What
trying to
Ben
avoid.
is saying is that on Huawei public cloud, for instance, you have a customized OpenStack, a customized Manila that behaves differently, behaves the way Huawei wants. And if Rackspace buys Huawei hardware and adds to their backend, so you have NetApp, Huawei, Infinidat, Rackspace has several backends. They shouldn't have that special behavior that's only available in Huawei's cloud because that's behavior that it's not consistent across other backends.
Right. That's exactly what I'm saying. So I don't have a problem with the addition of the metadata field in Huawei public cloud using it downstream to do special things. But I do have a problem with the upstream driver doing special things based on metadata fields.
How do we explain the existence of this metadata field? I mean, it's just a useless appendix for everybody else, right?
Well,
right now.
Metadata fields are places for users to jot down notes to themselves. That's what they are. That's what metadata always
I
is.
never saw it like that.
Right? Huh?
I never saw it like that.
Well, we're not for users.
Software applications all the time, you create an object and then you can right click on it and add notes to it, like inventory tags or
Annotation, decorations.
Yeah, I mean, it's just stuff that only has meaning to me as the user. It's a text field that the server will store for me, but not interpret.
Right.
It's very common
but
for
in this
software.
case, who is the user that's doing the annotations and decorations?
The guy that's clicking around Horizon and saying, access allow, and then he goes to the access rule. There's a box that says add annotations to this access rule.
Okay,
so I can write a note to myself.
So the real cloud user would be able to use this for that.
And my understanding is that's what Huawei wants, is the ability for the real cloud user to create an access rule and then put a tag on it, and then the server does something magical.
So maybe we could just implement the common attributes first for in the Manila API and implement at the standard API, like the
You mean option number 2 that we were talking about an hour ago?
Maybe option number 2 or option number 3, or if there have another attribute in Huawei, maybe we could just add it in the metadata, but implement in my downstream version about the driver code part, about the part of the driver code. So
for all squash in particular, or for something else?
For all squash, maybe we could just implement the standard way.
The way that Tom was advocating for a while ago.
Yeah.
Well,
that is an option for all squash, but what I'm getting at is I don't think this is the last time Huawei is going to come with one of these features. And I wanted to create I think it's the right thing to do to create a more generalized mechanism.
Here's my dumb question though: if a cloud operator is going to fork in the first place, why don't they add the metadata? Nobody else is really using it. This idea that we're going to just add notes. I'm going to add a little note saying this is a very important access rule. This is my favorite access rule. I'd like to color this one blue. I can't think of I'm being silly about it, but
you put people's names on it. Like this is Johnson's access rule. This is Bob's access rule.
All right, so they're notes like that.
I mean, because all the access rules shows you as an IP, but you might forget whose IP.
But we could also just say the only reason we're doing this is so they can work something on the back end, so they can just add the access rules to metadata too.
That's true.
In their fork. And I'm not sure I'm getting a compelling reason to put.
Again, the reason would be because we want to minimize the extent to which
we minimize it by creating a pre-known place.
Yeah, so for parts of these forked implementations that are common, we can take them upstream and say it's harmless to merge this.
So what other kind of objects would be the over time added metadata?
Well, it sounds like they already do volume snapshots, so perhaps share snapshots would be a place for this as well.
So
not now. Share snapshot metadata not now.
We don't.
Not now.
We don't.
But
do we have
you're
it?
saying on the sender. He's saying on the sender side,
Well, I don't even know if we have metadata on share snapshots or not. If not, maybe we need to add it.
Then we would need to add it if they were to use it for that.
Well, if it doesn't already exist, I don't even know.
Maybe it doesn't exist.
I haven't paid much attention to metadata.
Yeah, I mean,
objects, sorry.
it's such an unimportant thing that tends to escape your notice.
But with this, I don't have a good feel yet for how generalized, I get it for the access rule case, how generalizable a solution this would be for people need to do extensions. And when they need to do extensions, the WSGI API extension isn't sufficient. You know, because in some cases they may need, as you said, database table changes or something, and or something much more central. You know, this isn't going to solve that problem, but maybe it solves a whole lot of the domain of those problems.
Cinder has something called admin metadata,
Right.
which could actually be used for like an extension mechanism. So it's similar to metadata, and it's a generalized key value pair, but it's not exposed to the end user.
Right.
Such that if you weren't
It's the cloud operator, and it's exposed to the cloud operator.
right, it's supposed to be admin. The primary consumer would be special downstream code that was storing value in these fields, reading the value back out. It's basically just a generalized storage mechanism. So you don't have to extend the database, but you can use these tables to get an ad hoc extension to the database. And potentially implement an entire feature based on that. Again, I don't know if anyone actually does that, but it's a way to enable experimentation outside the core. So
I guess where I am on this is I think it's an interesting idea about how to do extensions. I don't see the squash attributes as the use case that should drive that. Now, if we were doing it anyway, would we want to do the squash attributes that way because it's cheaper?
We wouldn't do it. It would be left to.
I understand. And my thought is if Huawei did that for their cloud, that would leave the other people that want to do the stuff that the standard Linux export servers do out in the cold. Certainly Red Hat distro is not going to do a fork.
Yeah.
We would go say, you know, I don't know how compelling it is that we do it right this, you know, right this cycle that we have support for all squash and all squash and no root squash. But if someone were to ask me in the first place, do you want to support via Manila the stuff that the standard Linux servers support? Say sure, yes. How you should have done in the first place. You know what I mean? That would be our attitude.
The discussion from Tuesday, we considered doing that at the beginning and intentionally decided not to.
I understand, and it's not that I'm second guessing that. I'm just saying if you were asking naively about it, I would say, yeah, you know, let's do what a kernel server would do or a Ganesha server would do. That's our users are likely to ask for that eventually. Let's do that. And that might not. I'm not saying that argument should have prevailed, but I'm just saying it would be a natural thing for people to come out of the Linux community to want to do. So I think eventually we will want to support it, and we certainly wouldn't support it by metadata and a fork. And our, you know, with respect to this particular use case.
So my only other concern is if we do this by option 2 in the standard way, this will not be a small spec. It will not be a small change. It's going to be harder to do.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's going to be a lot of work, more work to do by number 2, and that work will fall on Huawei and the reviewers.
Yes. So are the reviewers up for taking what will effectively be a fairly large feature into the Rocky release, in addition to everything else we're trying to do?
Well,
hey, Patrick's here.
Hey, Patrick.
Sorry, we're short on seating.
That's fine. Yeah, so Patrick, we're talking about the NFS export all squash and root squash characteristics and so on that Linux servers have. Actually, we should probably get another data point. Do you know whether your backend supports them?
It does.
It does because it's
it's got like all squash and like no root squash.
Now, do you have a sense of whether your end users would expect or want to be able to
say that for a particular access rule, those would be used?
Maybe. So there's two broad categories that I think like 90% fall into the I don't care, I just want to be able to access my files, and then there's like some other share or some app thing migrating it to OpenStack. It's very particular access settings.
Right. Just checking. So the question was, I at least have been arguing that we were talking about the potential of using metadata fields so that a big cloud operator like Huawei could basically do their own code looking at metadata without, they'd basically have a fork of OpenStack anyway. So they would interpret it as they want, and they could stick those attributes in there for the access rules. Manila would be none the wiser, upstream Manila, but that would leave the rest of us out in the cold. We're not going to go fork in order to achieve that. So I was arguing that even if that's a good mechanism for handling these fork divergences, this use case didn't seem to drive it for me. You know, there may have some other ones for which that would be appropriate. And then the question, I'm sorry.
I think it behooves the community to solve this problem. How do people do extensions and experiments?
Right, and I'm not arguing against that.
Just because this kind of request is going to keep happening,
yep.
And we have limited bandwidth to just add a million new features. So it's really an energy saving mechanism. That's how I see it. If we get this right up front, it will save us a huge amount of energy in the future.
Sure.
And given that we have limited energy, it's maybe now's the time to do it.
Right. So I'm not arguing against doing that. I'm just not sure that this is the use case that drives it. We could be lazy about this one. I don't mean lazy in a pejorative way. Often it's smart to be lazy. We could use that to handle this, but the downside of that, in my view, would be that we might have to just revisit it in terms of the capability.
So I guess I don't think of it in terms of being lazy. What I worry about is an overwhelming tsunami of requests to implement new features that we can't keep up with. Because we're going to get as much work done as we can get done as a community. And other people are going to be the ones who are getting frustrated, not us, right? We'll do what we can do. We'll say no to things we can't do, and then other people will end up saying, "Jesus, you guys are slow and awful."
Right. All I'm saying is on this one, if Patrick's users or Ravana's users for their backend, or Amin's, say, "I want root squash," I want all squash, we'll say, "Oh, well, you still can't have it. You can go use it in Jones Cloud, but you can't use it in regular OpenStack."
We don't want vendors driving the direction of new features in Manila. We want users driving the direction of new features in Manila.
I just said if their users say, if Red Hat users,
the users should come to the community and say, "Hey, I wish Manila did X." And we would say, "Okay, Mr. User, we'll design that for you."
Right.
When the vendors get in the middle, then product managers have a way of imagining their users know everything, right? That's how product managers work. And they never heard a feature that they didn't like.
I understand.
So I would want the actual users to be involved in making the requests. So
you would be happier with saying, let's do it by the metadata thing. That'll enable Huawei to go work on it. And then if users ask for this in the future, we'll come back to it and bring extra stack for it.
I kind of feel like we need to do both. Because I don't disagree that maybe all squash in this particular instance that users really do want, we should implement the standard way. But I do have this worry about continuing to say no to people just because we have limited bandwidth to implement SNAS new features. get out of the way of people who are just trying to move forward.
Yeah, and that's why I was accepting the idea that for some things, it's probably maybe the best way to do extensions. I just didn't know if this is it.
Yeah,
And then that
extensions
comes-
will be more complicated to implement.
Well, and if someone has a better idea of a way to enable somebody to go off and do an experiment, I would love to hear. Like I'm observing how this works in the Kubernetes space, and they have a very different design than we have, and it's much more amenable to people just going off and doing stuff without affecting the core at all. I'm envious of them that their design is so much more flexible than ours in terms of people can just write code that works without touching the core. I wish we had a way to just enable that. So that's why I'm thinking about, is metadata the right way? Are extensions the right way? Is there another way?
Yeah.
In many ways, our whole architecture is unfortunately rigid.
And Patrick, our observation at the beginning was the whiskey extension stuff only gets you so far. Most of the interesting extensions we want to do, or people want to do, can't be done that long.
Right.
You need to add, yeah, you need to go to drivers, or you need to muck with the database tables, or, so they don't seem particularly useful. That's a nice idea. Okay, so then the question came up. I guess you were saying, do we want to do it this cycle? Do we want to put the so? I mean, my view of it is that you wanted to do the coding in this cycle. So the commitment from the community would be to be willing to review it, and you have to be willing to take the risk that it doesn't make it into the, even though we say we're going to do it, that it doesn't get that there's no guarantee on the number of iterations and whether it will actually be ready in time to merge.
Yeah, because we would need to get the whole capability thing in the public expert spec, scheduler changes, back-end changes, to do the whole chain of what we're talking about to make this
so it's sort of like,
capability to schedule. We have to be capability to schedule aware of. So if someone wants all squash, they can avoid the NetApp backend, for example. Right? Because if NetApp can't do it, we wouldn't want to schedule it in the NetApp backend and get there. Or we'll get undefined behavior. And whoever else.
Right. So this isn't really pioneering work, right? Though I mean, it's just a lot of work. I mean, it's not work that we don't have models for.
Right. Exactly. You could copy a lot of the way we did snapshots.
Right.
Different drivers can do different types of snapshots, and so they have a way of advertising that's capability to schedule the special field for the database.
Right.
You just have to look at those fields and to modify the admin API. I mean,
right.
It's not that hard. It's just doing it right might be hard.
Yeah. They're bringing them to us. Yeah. Thank you. Just returning the chairs to us. I guess they recommend it.
So we could
So if we just implement the metadata in Access, would that make your product manager happy? Would it make the ones that want to see the feature in Huawei's cloud happy?
it's just
Or they really want it to be merged upstream with this functionality?
and actually is if we just implement the metadata and it could be just implement the metadata. Our cloud product is fine, and they can implement the part of the driver code in their downstream version, so it is fine. But another problem is this requirement also from Yahoo Open Cloud product. So they
They're another deployer.
another deployer, and they just want the open source version about to implement the part of the driver code. So maybe this is the problem. About
And they're not really willing to run a Huawei forked downstream distro.
they want in this version they also have a little difference between open source and their version, but they want the API exactly as the same as
Yeah.
it does.
So they might have a little fork, but it's not, they don't want that fork.
They
don't
want some
they don't want to carry
interoperability.
this part.
Well, that's up to always business people how much work they want to do maintaining multiple forks, right? Like,
I think this might be a Huawei equipment for the people on the other cloud. You know, so, okay.
I guess what I'm saying is, I'm perfectly happy if, with the downstream people making these decisions, having to deal with the pain of their own decisions and not putting it on us. So if the downstream distributors want to be maintaining different forks for different customers, and they're willing to deal with the expense that incurs, that should be okay with us. Yeah, as long as it doesn't cause us to incur additional expense.
So for you guys, you think if there are ways to modify a little things, it would be better for
Okay.
our code.
So, but if we do this as a new extra spec, new capability, and schedule changes and so on, is bigger risk to you that it might not get in this release. You know, even though everybody says they're going to try to do it, there's no guarantee, right? There are more changes than if you just do it on the back end with metadata. So the metadata is a safer, quicker way to do it. But I'm not for it. I'm just describing, it's in terms of describing the decision back to your people.
I can imagine the upstream patch to add metadata to access rules, and I'm guessing it's 50 lines of code. Right. You got to have migration. You got to have a couple of new database fields. You got to have, okay, maybe it's more like 100 using a SQL document model, API modifications. But I mean, it's basically just key value all over the place, and linking it all together.
That's it's just an extra API extension, so it's just fine.
Well, but that as opposed to doing this the proper way with the whole new extra spec, when you're talking about schedule modifications, database modifications, API modifications, driver interface modifications, you're going to quickly get into 300, 400, 500 lines of code to do this the option 2 way.
Right. Well, now I'm for doing it the option 2 way, and you may be somewhere in between on that. But
I am totally unopposed. I just pointing out that it's review bandwidth is not running something else.
Right.
So review code it could be a big problem.
Yeah, but we have pretty low review bandwidth. I mean, I'm terrible at doing reviews, and it's not going to get better in this cycle. We have Rodrigo, we have Tom, we have Shane does some reviews. We have who else do we have?
Right, and I Gotham guy does some.
Gotham. Yeah, Gotham. Now that he's married, we'll hopefully get back into the review. He told me he was doing reviews earlier this week.
Yeah, he did.
So you both okay with the 2 ways about
the number 2 way?
Yeah, I mean,
both two ways to implement this. I just figure out which one is better.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I'm okay. If you wanted to use the metadata to do it, I wouldn't stand in the way of that. I think we would probably end up in a cycle or 2 needing to come back and do it as a standard capability.
Yeah. And I want to pop up the stack and talk about the other things that were part of this topic originally, the priority, which we discussed on Wednesday also.
Right.
In the room.
Right.
I don't know if you're any clearer about what was meant by priority, but if it is what we talked about and just a way of ordering the access rules, I think that is something that definitely should. I mean, that's just an oversight that was not part of Manila Core API to control the ordering of the rules and to define standards. Because right now we have
we defined what the semantics are in terms of the order?
It's undefined.
Right. No, I mean, even if the order is deterministic.
Oh, you mean if we add this priority?
If we add the priority, it says this rule is before the other one.
Yeah.
Does that mean that it overrides the other one? It's not temporal order of application. It's a semantic thing. I mean, I'm just being clear on this. Is that somebody might implement that temporal order.
I think the only way to understand it that makes sense would be higher priority rules get applied before lower priority rules, where 1 is the highest priority and infinity is the lowest priority.
Where before isn't a temporal statement. It's a statement about override semantically.
Right?
I'm just being clear.
You
on this.
apply the rules in order. The first match wins, right? First match wins, right, in priority order.
So specifically, we'll make a dumb set of a dumb access rule that nobody should do. Allow read-write access to 192, 168, 1.1. That's rule number 1. Rule number 2
Priority
says, priority 1.
Because remember, there is no number 1. The problem with Manila is there is no order. There's
Priority 1. See, we're going to have priority 1. Okay. Priority 2 rule says deny. It says read only instead of read write with exactly the same IP address.
He'll get read-write access.
He'll get read write access because of the priority. Okay. And we can do them with ranges and stuff that conflict and so on. Yeah. But okay. So it's right. Okay. So
I think that's valuable to implement for everyone. If that is indeed what Huawei meant by priority.
Is that what you had in mind?
I think would be a huge benefit to get that into Manila as a core feature. And then the last thing I wanted to discuss was there was.
But pause. I want to make sure is that what you meant by priority of access rules? Is that what
Just
you're
to
proposing?
reorganize.
Well, whether it is or not, I still want it.
I know that. I know that. I know that. I do too. But we don't have.
Now
You didn't want it before, but now she
But I
proposes you
want
want
to
it.
make sure that that's what they're proposing to work on.
Yeah, I checked it again. The priority for us just reorganize the rules.
Okay. But organizing the rules means what Ben said. It says which rule
Yeah, which rule wins?
wins if there's a conflict.
Yes, the
Okay,
range is 1
I'm just trying to.
100.
Yeah.
Well, it could be 1 to any number.
Okay.
I mean, maybe 100 is a reasonable limit for access rules, but somebody might want 200 access rules.
Right. If it's an ordering, there's not actually a limit.
Oh, yeah, actually, you're right. So if you can have multiple rules with the same priority, you're fine. Because you'll never have more than 32 rules that conflict with each other. Because there's only 32 bits in the IP bitmaps, right? So it would be really hard to come up with more than 100 rules that all conflicted with each other. If you have unconflicting rules, it doesn't matter if they have priorities equal the same.
What if you're using a IPv6?
Yeah, I was going to say there aren't only 32 bits in the.
Yes,
it's going to come back to that stage.
IPv6 netmasks cannot be longer than 64 bits.
Right, but there's more than 32.
64 is still less than 100. So 100 is probably sufficient for
For the
priorities.
bitmaps.
Because you would never have someone say, I need more than 100 priorities to get their correct behavior. But
I mean, if this is an index, we will need a number as high as 64 bits.
it's a column you can sort on. It's not an index. It's just a column you sort on. So you load up all the rules. You sort by priority. It's okay if you have multiple priority 1s and multiple priority 2s, as long as they don't conflict with themselves.
Oh, okay.
That's up to the user. And you sort that list, you send it to the back end, and you can get deterministic behavior there.
Okay.
Whereas you can't get deterministic behavior today. So, right,
So they can write them in conflict with themselves.
Right, yeah. If the user writes 2 rules that conflict and gives them the same priority, then they'll be right back to undefined behavior. But that's on the user then.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm just being clear on what we're solving.
So the other topic that came up in relation to this, and this could have been our confusion because of the word priority, was is there a QoS related request?
Now I checked it. Now we don't need QoS related.
There's no QoS per access rule. Okay, that's good because that was going to make my head explode. There was.
So you're planning on working on the priority access rules?
Yeah, I plan.
And on the squash stuff.
And what's to just do all it.
Quick question for the priority stuff.
what's the like upgrade path look like? Like
Yeah, everything gets priority 1,
priority 1,
and then you go change it if that's not what you wanted.
not priority 100.
Yeah, not infinity.
That
No,
doesn't
no,
matter,
I like limiting it 1 to 100 so we don't end up with huge integers. Because 1 to 100 is good enough.
Just and some upgrade. I guess I don't know. How do you guys keep that stuff? Like share exposed parameters, like in the database or something? Like, how do you go and set them all to be the right?
Yeah, where is the priority saved?
So, like, the next time I add a rule, how do I know what the existing priority
There
was?
would be API changes, so you could set the priority on creation, you could get the priority on listing, and there'd have to be an update access rule that would allow you to modify the priority of an existing access rule. You would need all 3 of those changes for this.
So when I go and upgrade from Queens to Rocky, I do a list.
You see all of your existing rules, and they all have priority 1,
Okay.
because that's effectively what it is today.
Yeah.
And then if you're not happy with that, you start modifying them.
That's good.
Okay, so we're okay with doing priority work. I mean, nobody feels like, oh, well, doing both of these things is going to be too much work, so we can't take it on.
I think it'd be easy to forward.
I think we should take them on, and if for some reason they're too much work, then we keep doing them and then in the next cycle. You know? So I think they're good things to tackle. Yeah, thanks for coming by.
I wanted to do a time check.
I'm sorry.
We're 2 hours in, and we haven't even started the Friday agenda. We're just covering stuff from earlier. So correct. We need to start making judgment calls on and not cover what's important to cover today.
Let's finish this. We're okay with priority work then. Okay, so let's take a 5-minute break, and then pick up again. And we have the optional size spec to talk about. Do you want to talk about that in 5 minutes? Stretch our legs for a sec.
Yeah. Well, what else in this list is really important?
Just 5 minutes.
Well, guns are
Simple change of size.
I'm sorry.
I think the optional size is just a simple change.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
So
Well, let's do it in a minute. But I want to get Gonzo back here when we start up. And
you want to pause the recording? Vicky, can you pause the recording while we take a break? Start the recording. And
so it's 3 minutes till the hour. Let's start at 5 minutes after the hour. We can talk informally about start the next section. We're going to take a 5-minute break, which is going to turn into a 7 minute.
Okay. Well, I have 10:56.
You have, oh yeah, my clock's still.